Starfield, after 3 years, does Xbox Series finally have a killer app, a really, really good exclusive that's worth buying the machine for, whichever machine you that's the point, actually.
You don't have to buy it. That's the whole thing. You don't have to buy it.
It's on Game Pass,
Yeah.
which is like incredible in and of itself. But also, what platform have you been playing it on, James?
Series S, small one.
Series S. How's it running for you on the Series S?
Pretty good. There's a bit of kind of texture popping and all of that good.
Yeah.
Bethesda junk goodness, but it plays really, really well. There's not much slowdown. There's not much of that sort of stuff. It's just there's just a little bit of, is there a specific name for when it kind of flashes in and out the textures in the background?
I mean, Mass Effect syndrome. I don't know. But, I mean, it sounds like okay, that's just video game stuff that we're all used to. I mean, that's pretty good because obviously, I think, given that the Xbox install base is mostly Series S, this has to work well in the Series S, right? Mm-hmm. It just has to. Okay, that's good to know. But so the question that we're opening the video with, just to give everyone a bit of background. So you're a guides editor. You've been sinking like dozens of hours into Starfield over the past week or so, in order to start producing those wonderful guides that keep us all employed. And you're a big Bethesda fan, right? We've talked about this before, as am I. I haven't played a single frame of the game. I'm really excited about it. But yeah, you've just been at it. I wouldn't say like at the coalface because that implies that it's a chore.
Well, there is a lot of mining involved, so maybe it is.
But yeah, I mean, what are your impressions of it? Just with that in mind, is this a system seller in your opinion? Does this make the case for Game Pass? Does this make the case for having an Xbox in the house?
I think it's a fascinating game in so many different ways. And because one of the best things about doing this job is that you get to play these games before they come out and you can kind of have your own view, your own perspective without it being kind of colored by everybody else online shouting about different stuff. But Starfield is one of the rare instances where I have absolutely no idea what people are going to make of this.
Really?
I think it's annoying to bring it up so soon, but now that the Baldur's Gate 3 has got this sort of added the console wars element to it, I'm really, really interested to see how just what people's perception of the Bethesda-ness of it is. Like, obviously, I really like this game. Other people that have played it that I've spoken to are a little bit cooler on it. That has a lot to do with it making quite a bad first impression. I think that everybody memes on the Skyrim opening where you're joggling through the cart or whatever, but this is even more pedestrian to the point where you're kind of ambling towards and shooting a few rocks, and then it's a very low-key thing. And then when you actually get chucked out into it's almost a bit weird to call it an open world because there are so many different scene transitions, and it is quite piecemeal in the fact that you are jumping between planets all the time. There are tons of scene transitions in the cities between different levels of the different residential levels, different areas.
Oh, are they still like loading screens when you go into a building and stuff?
Still loading screens.
Wow.
It's very retro in that regard.
We're going back to 2008 with this thing.
Yeah. It's extreme. It's a fascinating game, like I say, in so many different ways because it's so retro in so many different ways. There's so much new stuff. There's so much impressive stuff. Flying about in the spaceship, kind of orbiting planets, reminded me. It's a bit of a weird comparison, but the thing that it brought to mind for me was the Peter Pan ride at Disneyland, where you're sort of in a big black room and you have these like dioramas hung from the ceiling by string, and you kind of have this amazing sense of space that you don't really have anywhere else. That it's these incredibly professionally designed and created dioramas almost that it's really impressive to fly past in this enclosed space, and but you can also tell that it's kind of the illusion of space, that it does feel like a big black room, and it has these things populated into it because, like I say, there is a lot of transitioning between stuff. It's not like I've honestly not tried, but because the distances involved are so vast, but I'm not sure if you even could do the kind of No Man's Sky thing, where you kind of blast out of the atmosphere, go from one planet to a different planet, land on another one, because there are so many light seconds, light years involved with going from Mars to Pluto or whatever, that it's just not feasible to do that.
Well, that's interesting, because No Man's Sky itself, like, that is all smoke and mirrors. Like, you take off from a planet in No Man's Sky and point your ship at the next planet. That planet stays the exact same size in your reticule until it's loaded in, and then you actually start like, it's very subtle, but once you notice it, like, it kind of breaks down. The smoke and mirrors that every game is built out of smoke and mirrors, right?
Yeah.
But like, so the illusion of Starfield is quite obvious from the start, then, from what you're saying.
But I don't think that it's necessarily a jarring or an unimpressive or an unimpressive illusion. I think it is really fun and it's really good, and the space stuff is exciting. I really like the space stuff. But to answer the original question, does Series S and X have its own kind of killer app? I think Starfield in many ways definitely is that. And I bring up the kind of bad first impression because I think particularly my first experience with the game was jumping into the main city, New Atlantis, and right as you land, you have probably 5 or 6 front-loaded fetch quests where you sort of speak to and these are the side quests. So as soon as you land, you can kind of talk to different people, and they say, "Oh, go do this for me, go do that for me," or whatever. And then I genuinely think I did 5 in a row where it was like, "Go and get this package for me, take it somewhere else." Press A on one man, choose 3 dialogue options, gives you something, go and press A on a different man, and it was oh no, is this really it? This is gonna. The world is going to explode with how kind of basic and retro this is. And like I say, I think there was one at a bar where they were like, my shipment's been impounded. Go and hack this door, bring the package back to me, and I'll give you some money. Great. Went and spoke to the kind of spaceport police. They were like, we've been watching a dead drop. Go and get this package and take it somewhere else. And it's like, okay, another package. Great, cool. Spoke to somebody in a clothes shop, and they're like, I've bought this piece of art from somebody. Can you go and get it for me and then bring it back? And it's like, okay, package number 3, cool, done it. Then the restaurant next door was like, I lost my gem in a poker game to this bloke. Can you swap him this other thing for my thing and come and get it back? And it's like, great, package number 4. Oh my god.
And you're like, am I working for DHL now? What the fuck?
Exactly. And so those were the first 4 side quests that I did, and then I got to the next area, and it was like, I've put 4 tree probes around. Can you go and collect them for me and bring it back? It's like, okay, package number 5. Is this seriously everything that we can do in every single quest?
Yeah.
But once you actually engage with the main quest and the faction quests particularly, the game opens up so much more with a lot more vibrant story content that it's like, okay, here we go. This is the real good stuff.
This really tracks with, like, I remember asking you when you'd first kind of started playing it, I was like, how is it? Because our colleague Alex Donaldson, who's been playing it for RPG site, which he owns, he was saying to me privately that, like, this is so good. I love it. I feel like this game has been made for me, but I don't know how it's going to go down with the general population. Because, like, you know, and when I first spoke to you about it, you were like, "Oh man, I think it's a shiter." I don't know what your exact words were. It wasn't those.
Yeah.
but you know, that was the gist. It was like, I think this might be a bit of a Bethesda L. Yeah, and I was quite surprised about that. I was like, oh, okay. Because me and you like a lot of the same stuff. So I was like, oh, well, if James doesn't like it, I'm probably not going to like it either. It actually genuinely worried me. And then I spoke to you like about 4 or 5 days later, and you were like, okay, you know what? It's great.
I decided it was good after about three days. I think the biggest hurdle that it has to overcome is that with it being this kind of big tentpole, this big boon, this big kind of coup for Xbox, it's going to have to overcome a lot of people sitting down in front of it and go on, impress me, see what you've got then. This is going to be, it has that to clear that hurdle of expectation immediately. And I think it struggles because the role-playing aspect of Starfield, specifically in the beginning, is very woolly, that you are immediately plunged into. It kind of has this thing that you can kind of be everybody, but you're sort of thrust into this world and you're kind of everybody right at the start. And because as soon as you land on New Atlantis, you've got people saying, let me join your crew, pay me this much money. And you're like, I don't know what's going on. You kind of feel like you've skipped a load of establishing steps where you sort of this down on your luck miner that's just sort of getting their feet in, joining this explorer's crew in Constellation and all of this stuff, and you're already like thrust into the role of a ship's captain. It feels kind of quite jarring at that point. That you're like, this is the kind of conversations that I feel like I'm supposed to be having when I'm kind of on top of the world, sort of thing. And you're immediately kind of you feel like you're already at the top of stuff straight away, which is a little bit weird. The thing that most stood out to me in that respect was that the setting doesn't feel very grounded, because of course in like Fallout and Oblivion and Skyrim and all of that sort of stuff, particularly Fallout, you have that Ron Perlman intro where war never changes and all that sort of stuff, where the setting and the scenario is really well established and you know exactly what kind of world you're entering into. In Starfield, that doesn't come until the start of one of the faction quests, where as part of your orientation, you're kind of made to trudge through a museum and listen to all of the backstory of the game. And it's wow, I actually know where I am and what I'm doing, who I am, how this fits into everything else. This really, really should have been a Ron Perlman intro, where it's like, I know who the characters are, I know what the factions are, I know what's going on, essentially. And I think I understand why they didn't do it that way, because I think one of the things that Alex, one of the observations that Alex made to me as well, that it feels a lot more like a kind of space life sim, and rather than like a specific kind of themed scenario. But it still, I think, could have done with a stronger grounding in like I say, who you are and what you're doing straight away. And I think that just kind of ambling through stuff and coming straight up against those, like I say, pedestrian side quests straight away, you just kind of left thinking, is this it? But it's amazing once you really do get to the main quests, to the faction quests, how good they actually are. There's really intriguing mysteries that to solve at the core of these faction quests. Lots of great stuff, and it is brilliant. So,
you know, with this one, like Bethesda I think they're consciously trying to do something that's out of the comfort zone for them, right? I mean, we've written a few things about how I think Starfield is like very much a culmination of like what all of those guys, Pete Hines, Todd Howard, you know, they grew up in America in the 70s. So, you know, they've lived through like the supremacy of like NASA and in the space race, and kind of lived through almost kind of like the kind of start of the decline of America as a world power and stuff. So it feels like, you know, with this stuff kind of worships that whole NASA core stuff. It feels like this is very much in keeping with what they're about. But one of the fundamentals of the type of game they make, you would think would carry over, and they always have really strong openings. Like, and in fact, actually, I would say that traditionally Bethesda nail the opening of every game they've ever made, and it's usually about the sort of the 50-hour mark that people think, oh Christ, I'm getting a bit sick of this now, lads. It's like, you know, like Fallout 3 has that really strong sense of purpose straight away. Your dad's gone, you're off to find him. Oblivion, you come out of the sewers, the Emperor's dead, you've got this mysterious note to head to Kvatch or whatever. You know, Skyrim, like you escape your own execution, there's a dragon, and it's really, and you're straight on to the next thing. And the opening, the opening sort of few hours of all those games is generally the same for everyone. And then it opens out into the kind of proper role playing and choices and stuff. But you're never stuck for what you need to do next. And it sounds like with this, they kind of like, as you say, there's like a piece missing until you're a few hours in, which is interesting.
There's a couple of threads to pick up on there.
Yeah,
you mentioned the kind of Americana, which is massive, particularly in Fallout.
Yeah.
I think, as much as this phrase is sulfuric acid to many people, the politics of Starfield are absolutely fascinating. You like you mentioned the kind of NASA core stuff there and the space race. I find it really interesting that all of the kind of goodies in the world of Starfield are American, the British, the Japanese, the French, and then the kind of Russia-coded faction are kind of religious zealots that were lost on their own ship in deep space and then came back to the kind of society hundreds of years after. And Starfield's more than happy to name planets after like Yuri Gagarin or whatever, but then casts like the kind of them as the antagonists in the game as a whole, which I think is an interesting choice.
Are we going back to like sort of the original Star Trek there, where like all the villains are Russia coded, essentially?
Yeah, I guess so. And there are lots of interesting things, like aspects of kind of capitalist realism in the city of New Atlantis is sort of like a utopianist, futuristic society, but there are trash bags of rubbish piled in the streets and a sort of set decoration, and I can kind of see why they just sort of not haphazardly, but kind of put that as a little kind of incidental sort of world building that it's like, oh, this is a real functioning society. But I find it very interesting that they have that in their utopianist kind of vision of the future, it still has excessive waste just piled in the corner or whatever. I think that another thing that when you first land in New Atlantis, the first thing that you can do on your left-hand side is go to the bar and barter somebody down on their wage labor. And then on the other hand, you can go and sign up to be a police officer. And it's like, that's very interesting, kind of Americanized. And the whole kind of thing is a very Wild West kind of allegory, sort of frontierism. And there's going to be some good video essays on the politics of Starfield, because it's a fascinating mix of all of this sort of stuff.
It's beyond our remit to go into it here, but it sounds like it's a very neoliberal take on the frontier.
Pretty much. Exactly. It very much is. And it's, like I say, the politics of its conception are absolutely fascinating and very much reflect the environment that I assume that it was made in. But the other thread to pick up from what you said was the kind of big reveal at the start of the game, where everybody remembers at the start of Oblivion, right? Coming out of the sewer with the blinding light, and that happens again in Fallout, coming out of the vault for the first time you see.
I mean, they named it after Oblivion in the end, right? The Oblivion moment.
Yeah, exactly. The Oblivion moment in Starfield is opening a door and walking out into a kind of just sort of mining forecourt, and then you fight some pirates, and then you get on your ship and fly off, because it doesn't have that same. It doesn't have. And here is this massive world that you're going to explore. Well, because you can't.
There's so many worlds. You can't
do that with space because there's so many interstitials between going from one place to another. You just can't. It doesn't have that same impact because it's structured so differently.
That makes sense. It's a really interesting choice as well. It's like there's so many planets. Like, what do you open? You might as well open it on some sort of like mining facility, because I don't know what I expected. I was thinking about what the Oblivion moment in Starfield might be. I've been thinking about it for years, and I always imagined like somehow you were opening an airlock and the first thing you saw was a sun getting sucked into a black hole or some big swirly thing or some kind of anomaly. But that's just mad Star Trek power. But it's like, it opens just into utilitarian forecourt, and you start blowing people away. It's
Yeah,
great. Fine.
the kind of spacefaring fiction of Starfield is very kind of
Yeah,
grounded like that, and I think that is actually one of the best aspects of the game. That the visual design
that's brilliant.
of the starships
Yeah.
and the the sort of retro future tactile, like NASA core, like you say, is fantastic. It looks brilliant. I mean, another thing that I was speaking to somebody else that played it about was that there is a lack of cool clothes. There aren't any cool clothes, which is a little bit annoying. But the visual design of all of the ships and the interiors and all of that sort of stuff is fantastic, and another incredible aspect of the game. To finally kind of wrench myself back around to actually answering a question of whether this is the kind of killer app, and to finally say why I actually think that it is the killer app, is that Starfield is absolutely the ultimate play with a podcast game
Okay.
because of the procedural element to the incidental worlds that you have. So as far as I can tell, I don't have like the official kind of line on this, but from playing the game for, like you say, dozens of hours, as far as I can tell, it procedurally generates points of interest when you're kind of exploring. So if you pick a landing zone on just some random moon or whatever, you touch down, you can look for resources, you can scan the flora and fauna for the and all of that sort of jazz. But on your kind of horizon, you've got different points of interest that might be an abandoned mining facility filled with spacer bandits or whatever, or it might be a geological feature that you can scan to complete your survey of the planet so you can sell that data for money. And as you kind of branch out from these things, more and more stuff kind of pops up in the distance, and that's what seems to be the procedural aspect of it, that you will find more abandoned facilities, abandoned research things, caves, occupied caves, all of this sort of stuff, and then and that's how you that kind of build out the planets from there. And you can just endlessly sort of wander around, shoot some dudes, creep about, rifle through junk and see what you want. When I first started playing the game, it kind of felt like rifling through all this stuff just felt like tearing your house apart looking for your wireless headphones. That you just like, do I want this? No. Turning this over. Do I want this? No.
Yeah.
But once you have a better impetus of, I want this specific ship to get more cargo space, I want this specific thing to buy more resources, to buy a house, to put more stuff in it, I want to build out more outposts, so I want to be able to buy this, want to be able to buy that, makes a lot more sense. And you can just the difference between Fallout 3 and Fallout 4 in that kind of shooter core loop that it has was night and day, right? That Fallout 4 was so much better of a shooter than Fallout 3. And Starfield feels like another kind of natural progression of that. And similar to Cyberpunk 2077, which it feels like a topic in and of itself to talk about how these big AAA RPGs are essentially boiling themselves down to being endless shooters. I think Starfield is another good example of that, where you are wandering about with a really kind of engaging first-person shooter core loop, finding stuff, and you can take it to space and do the kind of aerial dogfights and all that sort of stuff, and it is really good too. I haven't, like I say, I've played probably halfway to 100 hours at this point, but there is so many different systems that you can just amble through all of this stuff and not engage with a huge amount of it. So I've not even upgraded loads of stuff on my ship. There's so much more to dig into on that, and I feel like it has the potential to be like the Xbox Series kind of killer app, because it has this endless aspect. It is a big name open world RPG from a storage studio that has this pedigree with creating interesting and engaging worlds, and more so than even Fallout 76, it was supposed to be to be endless. Starfield has a lot more an endless aspect to it,
Yeah,
even though it is single player. And I think that's why it has the potential to make you keep your Game Pass subscription forever and ever, because you never want to let that save go, kind of thing, because
yeah.
you can just bash through some facilities, grab some stuff, grab some loot, go and sell it. Oh, sick, I can go and buy a awesome looking spaceship and
Yeah.
put 3 of my best mates on it, and then
You know what, I
and all
love
that sort of
that.
stuff is great.
That's kind of what that's what I want. Like, I know that Bethesda are in the business of, they're trying to make another forever game like Skyrim that has this extremely long tail. And, trying to replicate that is, you could call it a bit of a fool's errand, because, like, it's quite unprecedented in terms of Skyrim for a single player RPG to have this much of a life to it. It's still just as active now as it was 10 years ago, which is just unheard of. And to try and kind of mimic that with their new game is, who knows? Like, the jury's still going to be out for years on whether or not that's been successful. But I love the idea that it's like, it feels like it might actually succeed, because, like, you can dip in and out of it. It sounds like the kind of thing where, like, I'm going to play it. Like, I'll get my copy on Friday, and I'm going to play it, quite a lot for that initial few weeks. I'll trail off, I'll play something else, I'll come back to it 6 months later and just pick up where I left off, because it's a Bethesda game and we know how to play them all, and there's not going to be any kind of, like, it's not going to be like the example I always come up with is Ghost of Tsushima now, because, like, me and my wife both had a thing with Ghost of Tsushima where we played it for a while and left it for a bit and then came back to it, and because it's got all these, like, stances and stuff, we were like, I've forgotten how to play this. It's completely left my head. But, like, Bethesda games aren't like that. You played one, you played them all, kind of thing. So yeah, I think that aspect of it is, like, it sounds like it's just a really compelling space life sim. It's got a bit of a story thread, but for the most part, it's just like, you're going to log into it, do some stuff, log out, and it's just going to have, it's always going to have a little bit of a hook. It's like a single player game with dailies, isn't it?
Essentially. And there are loads of the kiosks where you can get cargo missions, where you can get survey missions, where it essentially does have dailies, and those are the kind of life sim things that you can be like, obviously, with a lot of games like that, they're presented as being very immersive and in depth, and you can be a cargo hauler and a space trucker and all of that sort of spiel, but it is very supported by your own headcanon. You have to pretend that, right, I am a space cargo thing, I'm going to the kiosk, I'm getting my mission, I'm going here and doing that. There's not a lot of, it's not supported in the same way that the main story quests are. It's not going to be an immersive and interactive experience in that regard, as there has never really been a game like that, has there? And that was, again, to bring up Cyberpunk 2077, that everybody thought it was going to be this reactive, amazing thing where you could be anyone and do anything, and the game would tell you, oh, look, you've put those different shoes on, how cool are those shoes, and all of that sort of stuff. Starfield is very much in that vein too, where if you go into it thinking that you're going to get this amazing, reactive, immersive world, you're going to be extremely disappointed, because you're going to go and get an incidental side quest from a miner at an outpost who's going to say, these spacers nearby are bullying us, can you go and deal with us for it? And you go, okay, and then you sort of saunter over, and then everybody immediately attacks you, even though you had no kind of interaction with them. They're just kind of, they might as well be bears in that point, or death claws, or cazadors, or bloatflies, or whatever. It doesn't have that kind of human touch to it. It can feel quite flat in some ways. But if you have the perspective that it is a video game in 2023, that I feel similarly to how people are flabbergasted by kind of AI and think that it can think for itself and it can do these things, but it's only really generative based on the information that's going into it, and it's just guessing words in a sequence or whatever. It's very similar to that it doesn't actually have its own intelligence. It's just kind of building it from different pieces.
Mm.
And you have to be realistic about how immersive and interesting those just pieces are ever going to be. But I think that it is an engaging loop. The story stuff that is handcrafted is interesting. It's cool. There are loads of great cities. The New Atlantis is, like I say, is a really interesting utopian vision. Then you have a dingier kind of mining colony, Cydonia on Mars. There's a couple of space Vegases in different SKUs that you can go and that you can go and knock about on, and then there's the kind of frontier style stuff with the Freestar Collective, but that's for people to find on their own, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it sounds fun. I can't wait to jump into it. All right, well, so yeah, in your opinion, worth owning an Xbox for?
Definitely the Series S. Like we've both made. I've written an article. You've done a video on how good the Series S is, and how much is it? You can get it for less than 200 quid on sale all the time.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So is it worth 200 quid to play Starfield for however many hours you're going to play it? Probably. Yeah. That's like a pretty. We don't really live in a gaming landscape anymore where you can kind of be like, I own this console for Call of Duty and FIFA. I think you can add Starfield to that list now. I think.
Yeah.
What do you play on your Xbox? Call of Duty, FIFA, and Starfield. I think it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, I mean, well, at one point in time, it might have been Call of Duty, FIFA, and a bit of Skyrim. You know? Yeah. So that game is massively popular outside of the enthusiast crowd. So hopefully this will be the same thing.